Chapter 101. Love and Longing. Blades flash through the air as war sword meets war's word. Tri-type both as they flash through the air. I must admit, I'm not going to be comfortable with this for quite some time, Vernon remarks as he gauges her intent from how her sword weaver to both dodge her swing and try to mark her himself. You don't trust my battle skill? Mironoir asks him with a coquettish smile. I don't trust myself. You're too beautiful to lash out at, and I may make a mistake. Vernon remarks, and she blushes lightly before flicking him. Vernon, we're supposed to be dueling and training, not flirting. She chides him with an adorable smile on her face. Can it be both? Vernon asks impertinently, and she breaks down into helpless giggles, only to gasp in exaggerated shock as he taps her on the shoulders with the flat of the sword. You scoundrel! She exclaims dramatically. Such low and deceitful tactics. She continues even as the nearby children laugh. Have it you rogue, she proclaims before taking a playful swing. Ha ha, Vernon exclaims as he dances away from the sword and swats it away with his own to bring out a ringing sound more akin to a bell than the clash of swords. Show the sorcery, Visi Noir cheers. Make with the war fire, Lemmy Noir adds. You heard the ladies. Vernon says with a grin and deflects Mironoir's next attack as her sword blazes with bright blue war fire. Vines travel up Vernon's sword and overtake the weapon with leaves and thorns in an elegant twist that even has a number of small white and purple flowers through the center. The children cheer in giddy glee as the overlapping thorns and leaves prove to be somehow just as strong as the tri-type blades and seem to only grow stronger from the war fire and feed that strength into the life surrounding Vernon. Flowers grow and burst into full bloom surrounding his feet as the grass grows tall and long. They force their blades against their beloveds for a few moments before breaking away with a leap and landing. Mironoir seems to glide effortlessly as Vernon trails a blaze of sheer life as he skids to a stop. Flowers bloom, then seem to wither before puffing up into balls of fluff, which are then grasped by the wind and then spin around Vernon as he braces himself for a charge. There's a few moments of stillness, but before any of the children can shout anything, Vernon launches himself forward before presenting a blurringly fast stab that Mironoir melts away from. He skids to a stop and spins to turn it into a slash that she parries before going for a chop he spins away from to bring his sorceress sword around for a stab that she dips away from. A diagonal slash is deflected, and its returning stab is forced away before he grips the sword at the halfway point to try and direct the blade more precisely. He gets an open palm to the chest and is repelled backwards. He vanishes and the momentum is carried through the teleport into a massive circular swing that leaves a streak through the air and even tears off numerous flower petals from the sword while she ducks down beneath the attack. Her open palm launches him upwards and he twists to land nearly flawlessly. He then cuts through a ball of war fire and his vine sword devours it with gusto, even as he adjusts the interplay of metal and vegetation. A slash and the sword breaks into segments connected by the vines. The cheers of the Noir family as he then pulls the whip sword back into a single solid piece to parry her swing. The sheer force of the blow sends him flying back. He rolls with the blow and leaps into the air to send a couple of whip strikes down at Mironoir, who deflects the first one, then dodges the second. Then he surprises her by using axiom along the vines to anchor himself into the ground and pull himself in. Mironoir is somewhat off balance by the strange change in the battle flow, and rather than retaliate while he's open, she jumps back. He gives a spin of his sword and it clicks back into one piece with a smirk. You delight in surprising people, don't you? Mironoir asks, and he nods. It's a simple pleasure in life, Vernon admits before thrusting the whip sword forward. The wooden vines growing around the handle grow even faster, and the weapon extends into an enormous spear. Her dodge causes him to disengage the links and whip the blade after her. She isn't even nicked by the unusual but clumsy attack. Expecting to be surprised has allowed her to weave around it. She then cancels the warfire in her own sword and enhancing her strength to her pinnacle. She cleaves the sword from the spear, leaving Vernon with nothing but a stick. A stick he lashes out at her with even as it grows thicker and stronger in his grip. The sound of metal on wood sounds out until the sheer life of the staff catches her sword in the side and vines begin growing over it. With a grunt of exertion, Miro Noir tries and fails to free her weapon, but she does tear the staff clean out of Vernon's grip and he stumbles into her. The sheer surprise knocks her over, and the weapons go flying to the glee of the watching crowd. "Sorry, dear, I lost balance." Vernon apologizes as he holds himself slightly over his wife. She simply smiles, snakes her arms around his back, and then quickly pulls herself up and spins them both around so she's on top. "Nothing to apologize for, my love. It was amazing fun." She purrs at him before leaning down to kiss him gently. The crowd hoots and she waves at them to leave. "Little chance of that, my daughter. We live here," Sia Noir teases from the sidelines as Vizzy Noir and Limmy Noir run up to them at a full sprint. Oh," Vernon remarks in an amused tone as the kiss breaks off and both of them see the rapidly approaching Apook children. Miro Noir turns and grabs both of the charging children to be tackled off of Vernon, who just starts laughing at this point. It was almost dangerous to go outside of the small areas controlled by the Noir family. His stunt at the end of the Broken Shell tournament had snowballed that even people who were there and saw him act were telling exaggerated stories. The things he had done were everything that an Apook woman would swoon over, and a child would stare into the distance imagining it happening to her. A sorcerer from beyond the stars entering the tournament to reveal exotic axiom arts and incredible battle skill, then revealing utter devotion to his Apook wife and easily besting even the most powerful foes. And all of that's before showing himself the most honorable of all and outright shaming his most ruthless opponent before simply walking away. According to some of the Noirs, they can't go into public without 1,000 different questions about him being lobbed at them from every which way. His attempts to apologize for the inconvenience only resulted in laughter, as this was a good thing all around. A chance to boast and play themselves up. These sorts of things are a reason to stand tall rather than be annoyed. "So, what you gonna do next?" Vizzy Noir asks. "Yeah, what's next?" Limmy Noir adds. "You two think we planned what happened at the tournament?" Miro Noir asks in an amused tone. "Why not? I mean, the two swords and the weird armor and the time power and sorcery and huge control of warfire and Limmy Noir exclaims, trying to find the words a few times and failing as she considers things. "I got the wacky stick," Vizzy Noir exclaims, picking up Vernon's staff, and it lets go of Miro Noir's sword as she rushes off with it. "It's called a staff," Vernon calls after him. "I'm sure your broken spear haft appreciates the name." Miro Noir teases, leaning over and kissing him. He gives a little sigh before kicking up off the ground and then extending a hand to help up Miro Noir, who takes it. It's actually a legitimate weapon type on Earth. A solid oak staff can split a man's skull like a melon if you've got the strength to use it properly, he remarks before tucking a conjured flower into her hair. "Perhaps, but unless there's a sorcerer holding on to it or it's from the dark forest, then there's simply no form of wood that can harm an Apook. The very idea is rather silly," she notes, bending down to pick up both swords. "But these, really, Vernon, must you?" she asks as she stands back up to find that Vernon is already right behind her and hugs her from behind. "I think I must, yes. Now what were you saying?" Vernon asks her, and she lets out a slight laugh. "Where did you get the idea for a segmented blade that is both a sword and a whip?" she asks, and he chuckles. "Video games, cartoons, and my fellow nerds off the Dauntless." Vernon admits his mind going to a fighting game with a very scantily clad warrior. The image of Mironoir in such an outfit, modified for Mironoir's more generous frame, sends a tingle down his spine. Perhaps it's something to speak about later. After all, some mutual roleplay sounds like a great deal of fun. You've been released from active duty and still working with your fellows. She begins to chide him. It's not really work. The Nerd Squad are my friends and we're connected by a passionate fascination with Axiom. Is it really any kind of work if it's something you're passionate about and find relaxing to do? He asks, and she sighs before leaning into him. Besides, you have your own hobbies and entertainments. Or has playing a yitran suddenly become a chore? He asks, referring to the vertical instrument. The things were almost like the Japanese floor guitars, kodo, except they had a thick bass at the bottom to allow them to stand upright. Also, when played afoot was usually on the bass to steady it. It was played with the fingers, and there was a second more quiet method that involved the player leaning against the yitran from behind. Well, no, I suppose not. You've made your point. Mironoir notes as she collects the swords in one hand and then just luxuriates in her husband's embrace. She then quickly pulls the swords up and out of reach as Liminoir and Vizinoir race up and hug them both around the legs, with the staff Vizinoir's been dashing around with, knocking into the swords with a loud clack. Careful now, these are still rather sharp. Blows my mind that sparring is done with razor-sharp weapons, Vernon mutters. Restorative medicine and medical techniques, darling. It lets you get away with everything but outright executing your opponent, and as harsh as it may be, pain is an excellent teacher. She notes before tossing the sharp weapons well away from the two children and near the edge of the yard. Can I have a sword? Vizinoir asks. Yay! Swords! That's awesome! I want one too. Liminoir echoes, bouncing up and down before they both split up and bunch up their hands while giving Vernon the biggest puppy dog eyes they can manage. You two do know that I'm young enough to remember pulling that kind of stunt myself with my own parents and sometimes even by accident, right? Vernon asks after a few moments. His tone is fairly unimpressed, but there's a flicker of amusement in there. Please, they beg as one. If your mothers and fathers say yes, then yes, otherwise no, Vernon says, and Mironoir giggles a little as they rush off cheering in glee. What's so funny? I did much the same as a little girl. It's how I got them to let me start my warfire training early. Mironoir notes with a fond smile. So odds are I'll be making some smaller warswords then. Oh yes, I'm afraid so. We're a martial people after all. A sword is just a sign of maturity.